Well, I mean, how practiced are you with guns? Not so much in
Uh,
controlling them, but in, say, discharging them.
I was in the IDF for a little while, so I'm fairly familiar with guns.
Well,
The,
when was the last time you squeezed that trigger, if I may ask?
Oh,
the,
well, yeah, back in the IDF,
Well,
but
that's
to
when you
be
were
fair,
How long ago was that?
20 some years.
Damn. So wait a minute. So technically,
hang on,
you
hang
may
on.
not, you very well may not have squeezed a gun since I, your Lord and Savior, have existed on this earth.
Yes, yes, that is
So
my point.
yeah, but I've had no need.
But you're
Okay.
from the North Pole, so your only other
Yeah,
experience with people is Santa Claus. That's not really relevant.
Santa
yeah,
Claus
this
tries
is
to fuck
true.
the polar bears.
This is
We are
true.
live, people. Hello. Welcome to Reason Speak.
Oh, yes, we've been live for a little while. Welcome to Reason Speak for Thursday, September the something, 10th, 2015. The usual suspects are here. I don't even have to introduce them because I'm one of them. I'm Sidney. Hello. We got Kenny, as usual. We got Damien. Good morning.
Good morning.
And our resident alien from the North Pole, Nathaniel.
Brrr.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've got a number of topics to talk about today. Neither of them are pleasant. They're all about fucktardery. The one that I just read that Kenny showed me, introduced me to, has really pissed me off. And of course it involves the fucking Muslims. It fucking involves fucking Iran and fucking fucktardery. So let's get to it. I think I'm going to screen share the article, and then we're going to have a fuckfest on Iran because I'm starting to hate Iran. No, fuck that. I already hate Iran. I've been hating Iran for a long time. Sorry, I've been hating Iran already.
It's Islam in violation of women's rights. It goes together like peanut butter and jelly.
Yes, indeed. So this lovely lady here is in jail in Iran. Why? Fuck knows why.
Well, I think she originally went to jail for something to do with cartoonists, because you know they don't like their cartoons. But she may have her prison sentence extended for shaking her male lawyer's hand, because apparently that counts as indecency.
Yeah. Now, the way
Absolutely
they
indecent. Lawyers are indecent, and their hands should not be shaken.
Not by women. Not by
Not by
women.
anyone. Not by anyone.
No. A man can shake a male lawyer's hand so long as
No, that's
there's not
indecent too in my
additional...
book. No, lawyers are
Gotcha.
just indecent. So yeah, sorry.
Well, of course, that's
listen.
because you're a polar bear. They won't fucking represent you.
When you shake
Yeah,
somebody's hand, if you're a woman in Iran and you shake somebody's hand, you are guilty of an illegitimate sexual relationship short of adultery.
so I was just
Guilty.
vocalizing. I was just vocalizing my distaste. Um,
Oh, why don't we lift sanctions on these guys and give them an opportunity to build a nuclear bomb, huh? Why don't we just do that?
well, you know, yeah, this nuclear bomb deal is such a fiasco. It's such a mistake. It's not even funny how big of a mistake this is.
Hmm.
I don't know what to do anymore. I don't think that it's. I think we're inevitably going down the path to a huge regional war at this point because of this deal. I think that clinched it. Frankly, it's just not.
Exactly.
You know.
If I were you, I'd move to Japan or somewhere.
Yeah. Thanks for the idea. Um, yeah, I agree. Look, this is truly kind of a Chamberlain moment. And I actually don't like to badmouth Chamberlain because that is that sort of example and for the most part, because he's such a he's used as such a bad and weak as a representation of weakness. But actually, much to his credit, once the war started, he completely backed Churchill. He saw that he was wrong, and he completely went over to the other side. He agreed that he had been wrong. He essentially he said, we have nothing left to do but fight. So Churchill actually saw the error of his ways, acknowledged them, and tried to do something about it. So I respect him for that. But the problem is that all these people who are voting for this thing, who support it, this is not an immediate threat to them. And I don't think they think that this is an immediate threat to them. And I think that essentially they'll be long out of power by the time this thing goes completely, south, which is a bit dishonorable, frankly.
Who'll be out of power?
Anybody who's voting for this now, I think will be out of power, or most of them will be out of power in the next, less than a decade or so. And we know Obama's going to be out, his whole administration, but it's not just him. I mean, it's everybody who's voting for it, etc. I think that they essentially are saying, well, it's a long way down the road, so we don't have to deal with it. And I think that's a bit dishonorable, frankly.
What do you think? I have a really bad picture in my head when I saw Mike Huckabee standing next to Kim Davis.
Oh God.
Saying that she's quite right to follow conscience and not have to do her job because of it. This is the guy who's run for president.
Right. I'm of two minds actually with her. She's an idiot, so let me get that right out of the way. And I couldn't have been happier if she had been sitting in jail for the rest of her life. I just don't care. The problem really is what she believes and what these guys believe, as far as I can see, is not actually Christianity. It's like some warped, weird version of it. But the whole message of Jesus was don't try to revolutionize the secular world in which you live. Deal with the secular world, obey the laws, and live your life in the secular world. Normally, when it comes to religion, we are going to think more of a spiritual side, and that's where you get render unto Caesar what is Caesar, render unto God what is God's. So there was a clear dictate from I'm an atheist. I shouldn't be defending Christian doctrine, but I feel I have no choice. These people are morons. They don't even understand their own fucking religion.
Well, of course they don't. That's why we have fucking 20,000 different denominations of Christianity. You can believe just about anything and slap the label of Christianity on it and it'll fit. It'll work.
Yeah, but this seems to be more of a fundamental misunderstanding of Christianity.
It is, and to back that is that quote you mentioned. That's not the one and only quote in the Bible that implies that. There's just off the top of my head. It also states in Hebrews, in Titus, and one or two other places that I've just lost the.
Yeah, but that was
where it says that.
Yeah, but that was in essence that was the entire point of Jesus' message. That was the fundamental point of Jesus' message. Everything after that is the expand. Comes after that first point. The context of the time was that they were waiting for a political Messiah who would come to physically redeem the land for the Romans. And Jesus came around and said, "You don't need that. We can obey Roman law. We can be in the Roman Empire. That's not what should concern us. They're daily laws, as long as we're not forced to slit people's throats, essentially, are fine. We can obey those. That's not a problem." And that's the whole reason why the zealots from the Jews didn't like his message originally, because to them the Messiah was a political figure. I mean, he was a religious figure, but a political. I mean, he was a king, and Jesus was saying we have to separate this. So that's the entire point of Christianity, and they completely misunderstand that.
Yeah, he was supposed to be a warrior in the true sense of the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally. Yeah, a warrior king is what he.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point, and they don't seem to understand that. I mean, they really don't get it. They're morons. How is it that I, as an atheist, understand that message better from Jesus? You know,
because we've actually read it.
Yeah.
Ourselves.
And the funny thing is, that's one of the messages in Christianity I can agree with.
Well, you're forgetting.
As an atheist. I mean, that's the whole irony. It just blows my mind.
Well, you're forgetting one of the fundamental parts of Christianity, which is anybody who's a Christian whose ideas diverge from you is not a true Christian.
Yeah, but all of that comes after its fundamental premise.
Okay, but it doesn't matter what the book says. Come on now. Half the people haven't even read the fucking book.
Right, I know.
Yeah, and if they stuck by that premise, a lot of us, I won't say all, but a lot of us that are anti-theists wouldn't be so militant about our anti-theism.
Yeah, no, of course. There wouldn't be anything to really argue about. You could argue about the philosophy of it, but that's basically it. I mean, as long as they would, if they stuck to their corner and said, "Well, this is just our religious beliefs. We pray here quietly, etc." Well, yeah, okay, I don't have a problem with that. I may think you're wrong, but other than that, I mean, I think people who like certain kinds of music are wrong, but doesn't mean I'm gonna be tempted to go out of my way to protest it.
You haven't accepted Marilyn Manson as your Lord and Savior, so your argument is invalid.
We've gone over this, and I am a heretical bastard for it. I realize this, but that's fine in my universe.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I know.
I'd like to send out a message to all the armed atheist militias of America to please get ready.
Yeah.
We are going to battle with the heavily armed Christian militia, which is traveling to Rowan County to prevent a rearrest of Kim Davis if she violates her terms of release.
Yeah, let them try.
So we've got armed militias in Kentucky.
This is just proof for me that these people are just hypocrites. They're no different to all these so-called free speech advocates that still try and censor people.
Yeah.
Yeah. These people, these militias, they love the Constitution when it suits them. When it doesn't suit them, then all of a sudden they come up with all these excuses that these people aren't doing what they're meant to be doing, they're not doing their jobs, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
They're nothing but fucking hypocrites, that's it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and yeah, I mean, it's just, but as for her personally, I think she's just an idiot, and right now she's being used by, people like Mike Huckabee and the rest, and the Liberty Foundation, or whatever their name is. These people are essentially using her as a mascot for their cause. I think she's just a moron, frankly, and she, she's just a convenient tool for them. But again, if she sits in jail for the rest of it, I couldn't care less. There are other better people to be upset about being in jail than her.
How about these guys? Shouldn't they be in jail? These fucking asshole Hasidic bastards. Shouldn't they be in jail for insulting our intelligence?
What's this story about?
Well, who sent this to me?
I did.
Kenny, go for it.
So I've skimmed over the article a little bit based on what I've extrapolated from it. This is a college run by Hasidic Jews, so it's like a private college.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the graduates of this college can't even really speak English nor do basic math. And it's not even like this is a college in, say, a non-English speaking country. This is a college in New York. And
no, that's just outrageous. That's
right.
Unacceptable, frankly.
So people who are graduating, mind you, these people have degrees. which means if they're looking for a job, they're going to be
degree,
more
wait, degrees
qualified.
in what, though? I mean, if it's degrees in biblical studies, and okay, fine. But if it's like engineering or something, no,
But it
that's not
doesn't.
fine.
But I mean, it almost doesn't matter because it's like a lot of employers. If you just have a degree, you're more qualified than someone like me who just has a high school diploma. So
Right, but
these
okay,
guys,
I would actually put a caveat on that, because somebody who graduates from Liberty University is not going to have the foundation to be in any real job market force either. And even though it's called a university and it's people accept it as a university, to me it's not. And so I would put this yeshiva in the same category. It's just a bullshit piece of paper. It's got nothing to do with really getting a degree. They can have a doctorate for all I care. And okay, so if it's in religious studies, well, yeah, okay, I would accept that they are knowledgeable about religious studies, and I would call them, let's say, a doctorate of religious studies for all that's worth, in my view. But which is not much. But anything else, I would just say no, that's unacceptable too.
well, I mean, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, there are definitely some employers who, if your degree is irrelevant to the job, then they don't even really look at your degree. But I've had jobs in the past, like when I used to work in real estate, there were people who had fucking criminal justice degrees and shit that's not even relevant to real estate, making $20,000 more than me per year for doing the same job, all because they have a college degree. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is these guys are getting college degrees, and if they go to an employer who's a fucking dumbass, who's just like, oh yeah, you have a college degree, you're automatically more qualified than someone without it, they're going to be making more money than someone like, say, me, but they can't even speak English nor do basic math.
Yeah, no, I find it totally unacceptable. To me, that it says their diploma is worthless to me. Worthless. Sorry.
I just gotta give some props to the Batman over 9000. He said the Liberty University degree would be great for people who want a job as a manager of Walmart.
Yeah. Well, you can always use a diploma as toilet paper in a pinch, I suppose, but that's about it, really. I have no respect for these institutions. They're just, these people all live in a bubble. I mean, look, these Hasidic Jews in New York who are going to this, they live in a complete bubble. I would not call them part of society. I would not, I don't categorize them in the same respect, I guess, that I do other people who are like, living in society proper. So no, this doesn't surprise me, but again, it is completely unacceptable, and I think that they should, if they have accreditation, I think it should be revoked, frankly.
And how much are they paying for tuition here? That's another important question, because if you're paying for this education and you're not getting your education, you're essentially being robbed.
Yeah, well, I don't think that these guys have a lot of money in most cases. They have very little money. In fact, a lot of Hasidic Jews apparently live below the poverty line. That's their choice.
Fucking tell that to someone who thinks Jews control all the banks, then.
Yeah, I know. My response to Jews control all the banks is come to Israel and see how shitty the banking system is, how it just doesn't fucking work, and then tell me how amazing they are at it. It just doesn't add up. But
having all the money and controlling all the banks
this is just ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous, frankly.
But my understanding with the say of these Hasidic Jews you're referring to that are under the poverty line is they actually don't really care, so they're not doing anything to change that. So it's
I know. It's absolutely voluntary.
Yeah,
they live in a bubble. They live in their own society. It's like the Amish. They live in their own society. Well, the Amish less than, I forget the other group. Mennonites are the ones who would interact more. Amish is sort of in the middle, and there's one group I think that interacts less than Amish. But you get the idea that
Yeah.
They don't interact much with the outside world. They live in their own society. They're happy that way. But it doesn't mean that they should be accredited, or when they have a diploma, it should not be counted as a diploma. Sorry, you know.
No, but that whole article highlights one of my major issues with religious schools in general, and that is, while some of them you can argue they're quite respectable in terms of the education that the students receive, there's always, in any aspect of religion, whenever you leave the door open for them, shit like this is always going to happen.
Well, no, I would say that only with the extreme form. I mean, remember, Oxford actually started as a religious institution.
Yeah.
But
my point was, it's cases like this are always going to crop up.
Yeah, with the extremists, absolutely. I mean, yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I just think it's a sham. But I think it should. Okay, fine, it's legal. I just think it should be recognized as a sham. And again, I don't think they should be accredited. I think that should be taken away. I don't see why.
And here in Australia, while they're still technically regarded as a private school, they all now get government funding. Most of them actually get more money from the government than public schools. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, you have no argument with me on that one. Yeah, absolutely not.
I don't think they should get a dime of government money. And every study I've seen actually all point to people going to secular schools generally end up more successful in life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I have no disagreement with you.
Unless you want to get a job changing Pat Robertson's diapers.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, if they want to run a seminary or whatever, you know, a yeshiva, fine. I guess that's what they aim to do in life. But anything else, no, I don't think that they should be recognized as legitimate. No.
Well, Orthodox Jewry is pretty good for doing shit like this.
Yeah. Again.
I mean, they're pretty. They look. He's holding that knife with meaning. He really does want to plunge it into the back of that little girl's back. I mean, he's a really good person.
That really was.
I think
horrible.
You're misinterpreting this picture here. I think her backpack is stuck, and he's just cutting it off to help her.
Yeah. No.
Obviously. But he's a man of God. He clearly wouldn't do something like
he
stab
murdered her. It was such a shame. I mean, all of Israel was shocked.
Yeah.
Well,
there was a lot of
these guys still allowed to walk around.
Huh?
These guys still allowed to walk around in their black hats and their black garb and.
Well, sure. There's some down the street.
They're allowed to
neighborhood of them down the street from me.
And they're allowed to shirk their responsibilities to society that they live in. They're allowed to get.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think that
they can study for the rest of their lives. Silly.
I don't think that should be legal at all.
Well, you know, they're very busy people. I mean, they have to spend all their time controlling the banks and controlling the media and creating things like 9/11 and fucking, what else do the Jews get accused of? Oh yeah, false terrorist bullshit.
Listen, but Sid, I agree with you, man. I'm none too enthused about most of these guys.
I know, but I want to see these guys fucking taken out. You know.
Well, how?
They're elevated to this pedestal in society where they're given some kind of reverence for absolutely no reason.
No, most people here don't like them.
Well, okay, nobody likes them, but I'm talking about they have a certain amount of seats allocated to them in the Knesset, which is...
No, that's just because they vote for them. I mean, that's because these guys are here and they vote for their party, so their party gets in.
They vote for their party, but they don't go to... they don't go to join the IDF, they don't join the workforce, but they vote for their You
No,
know,
I know.
vote for guys to go to Parliament to
it's really horrid. I think.
ensure that they get free money for doing nothing.
But I told you that's changing. I mean, the attitude has totally changed. There has been a push for these guys all to go to the military. There's been a push to stop, subsidizing them, etc. And I think that's just inevitable. It's been changing. The society here is sick of these guys. Frankly.
In hard numbers, how many people are there that don't go to the military every year because of this?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know what the percentage is. It's not that big though, because they're not a large part of the society. The problem is that they're growing because they have children like rabbits. So and most Israelis are like in the agnostic European category where they have none to one child type of thing. So essentially their population is growing, but it's still a minority. It's not like it's not a huge percentage of the population. You know, but it makes a fucking difference, and they don't pay taxes. They leech off society. They're taking the money that the rest of us pay. So they're just fucking parasites, as far as I'm concerned. You know, look, if they want to pray all day for Israel, fine, but get a fucking job and pray on the job. But it's not like the ancient Jews weren't ultra religious too, but they did their daily work. There was guy baked bread or tanned leather or what have you. I mean they still somehow managed to be holy in their own heads, like good enough Jews in their own heads that they didn't have to just sit around praying all day. They actually got things done. So
when did the sitting around praying all day thing start?
Well, Hasidim has an interesting and lengthy history, which I won't get into, but essentially a couple of hundred years. It's not a very, very long.
It's not very long, exactly. So I'm saying it's from the mid-1700s or so.
Yeah, essentially.
So probably once they realised they could start leeching off society, is probably when they started doing it.
No, they started doing this in Eastern Europe when they
Well, no, okay. A lot of these guys in the ghettos, they couldn't have jobs because they couldn't get work because they were Jewish. So that's okay, fine. I don't put those guys in the same category. I think many of them would have been happy to have work. But these guys are in the same situation. They're in a free country, which a small percentage of them don't even recognize, and they're still taking advantage of all their rights. I mean, it's completely dishonorable. And so no, I don't have sympathy for those guys. Now, okay, again, I don't categorize them all in the same boat. Some of them volunteer for the military, have jobs, manage to have a full daily life contributing to society. To those guys, I say fine. If they're just like the rest of us, then I'm not gonna say they shouldn't be here. They're free to believe as much as the next person. Okay. But the ones who deliberately don't contribute to society, no, fuck them. I don't want them here. I just don't. I just don't see right now that it's...
Well, why don't you go and give them all a ride to the airport so they can fuck off?
That's
yeah, but where to?
Where
are they going to get a ride to?
Self-identified group.
Iran.
Yeah, there's like the small group Naturi Karta that's actually pro-Iran. They're crazy, But yeah, I mean, again, I got no problem with what your attitude towards them. I feel exactly the same way. Hell, most of the people in this country feel the same way. Tired of this shit.
Oh, what is this now?
It's for me.
It's for you? Hello? Hello? Well, that was very nice. No one.
Fucking Sid answering the phone for a pimp he forgot to pay.
No, I'm just surprised.
The best show on the internet.
Oh, no one I forgot to pay, baby.
I haven't had a landline in like 15 years. I'm just surprised you have one.
I need it for work.
Well, Sid is fucking ancient. I mean, does that honestly surprise you?
Yeah, a bit.
He's probably got a fucking telegraph.
What do you mean you haven't had a landline? What else is there?
Cell phone.
What the fuck's that?
I've got one now because it was part of the internet package that I got off my ISP. but I don't know if you could even call it a landline anymore because it's a VoIP system. So
Yeah, cable VoIP is it's not
No,
really.
mine's definitely a landline.
it's
No,
not
I just have a
technically
cell phone.
Do you got a telegraph too, Sid?
So what?
Do you use carrier pigeons?
So what?
Oh man,
Do you even know what carrier pigeons eat?
I think he walks around.
I
in
know that
spats
carrier
in
pigeons
his
are
Sunday
extinct.
best. Sid walks around in spats in his Sunday best. You know, that's what it is, with his pinstripe suit. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all going to come to an end when the government ends prohibition
Yeah, that's
of
right.
alcohol.
This internet thing was just a fad. My brother got that told once by Sony, actually, back in 1992. We were working for a nonprofit, him and I, and it was a startup nonprofit in DC. It was going to be represent all the interactive industries, including internet industries, etc. And they went to Sony at the time. It was like 1992 or 93. They went to Sony to have a meeting to say, if they could join up because others had joined up already, other big companies. And the Sony guy in the meeting told them straight out, we think this internet thing is a fad. And they didn't join. They were totally serious. So I remember my brother's face when he came back from that meeting was just like utter stunned surprise for probably about 3 days straight. Like, couldn't believe this, Anyway. So on to other things. So what else do you have for us?
I just want to know how come Sony's still surviving if that's kind of the deal with
Well,
them.
actually, Sony did very badly at first with internet stuff, and it's still kind of iffy. You remember Sony used to be the company for technology.
Yeah. And
Back
everything used to be expensive.
In the
because
80s
Sony
and
was
early
expensive.
90s, they were like the company for all technology gadget stuff.
Yeah.
Now they're
I remember having a Walkman. If it wasn't a Sony Walkman, it was shit.
Yeah. I mean, they were like the Apple of the day, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually got completely sideswiped by people who saw the light faster than they did. They were very, very slow to adapt, actually.
Yeah, I remember there used to be Sony stores all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Digital cameras were mostly Sony at the time and stuff like they had the first digital cameras and.
Okay, so enough shilling Sony because they don't fucking fund
We're not
our
really
podcasts.
shilling. We're kind of bashing them.
No, fuck them. Until they give us money, fuck Sony. Our next story. Who here is a fan of beating children? Anybody? You? You said okay.
Yeah, spare the rod, and spoil a child. That's my.
Well, of course.
I don't like beating. Hang on, I'm not a fan of beating. It toughens the meat too much. It stresses them out. So
Yeah.
when I pull them out of the oven, they're chewy, too chewy.
Yeah. Beating them should only be done, just before cooking.
Well, I
and
think
that will tenderize the meat.
I think the best reason to beat a child is when they recite the Quran incorrectly.
Oh, that's always good.
Always.
I agree.
That's the best reason.
If there's anything that we can agree upon, gentlemen, it is that.
Because we've got some. Hold on, let me see if I can screen share this bullshit.
Send it to me.
And if they don't learn
Okay.
from that, there's always a good beheading on the horizon.
Yes, of course. Well, we've got some teachers at. The hell is the name of this school? It took place at the Jamia, Jamia. However you.
Jamia.
The Jamia Mosque. And we got some teachers who were beating children at this mosque because they were reciting the Quran incorrectly.
They deserve.
This is in. You know what? This is fucking in England.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It is in England.
Fucking Birmingham, England.
So this isn't even some like Yemen or Afghanistan shit. This is England shit.
I think you people are making far too much about this. I'm of the mind that maybe these children deserve it. You know.
Okay. 2 Islamic school teachers who beat a 10-year-old boy with a stick for wrongly reciting the Quran have been jailed for a year. But they're gonna get out in exactly 1 year in next summertime, and they're gonna start beating up kids for not reciting the Quran again. It's gonna happen.
I think it's terrible that they went.
1 year.
How unmulticultural is that? How racist is that? Jailing them for that? You know, they have their own culture. We should respect and accept that. And I think that's a terrible thing to do to a person.
I'm actually glad that that's finally. I know you're being facetious, but that was actually the case. It was happening a lot too often, and we're now slowly starting to see instances in Western countries where judges and magistrates have had a gutful. I mean, there's this one. There was only a couple of months ago. There was a case here in Australia where an Islamic father, a Muslim father, sorry, sold his 10 or 12-year-old daughter off into marriage. He got jailed for 6 years, I think, and the judge, as he was handing down his verdict and sentence, slammed this idea of appeasing religious sensibilities, saying how utterly ridiculous it is. So very pleasing to start seeing this happen.
Well, I think, ironically enough, I think the immigrants have been doing it. The immigrant situation seems to have had a awakening effect on Europe in a sense. The politicians are squabbling about it, but it's clear that a majority of the populations in many countries at this point have had enough, and they're very concerned about it, and they've been expressing themselves more and more. I think, ironically, the immigrants themselves have created this this awakening effect.
Yeah.
You know, coming in too fast, and essentially people suddenly are shocked into they find themselves in a new reality and not as afraid to speak up about the problems of it. So I think that we're going to see this is really the tip of the iceberg, I think.
That's a concern here in Australia too, with our Prime Minister announcing the huge increase in how many we're going to take in. But unfortunately, it's only the minority of us that have this concern. And I read an article yesterday that highlighted the problem from the Lebanon civil war back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Our current Prime Minister took a massive increase of Lebanese refugees in the same sort of context as what's happening right now. 40 years later, we are still reeling from the effects of that.
Yeah, it's...
And these are adverse effects, they're not positive effects.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a really big problem. I think Europe is starting to wake up to. I think the population is. The politicians appear to be divided at this point, but there does seem to be much more grumbling coming from politicians who were previously rather silent on the matter. Now there seems to be a slow recognition in some circles that this can't continue. This can't go on. And you know, we all want to save people and be nice, but you know, this is a situation we have to talk about the specifics, and nobody wanted to deal with this. Apparently, I don't know. I mean, it's just,
it is pleasing that more and more of the general population is starting to realise that taking in migrants in any form has effects. So to take in large groups of them, first off, you need to make sure that your economy can handle it, your social services can handle it, because let's face it, all these countries that these people are trying to get to, they all have socialist services of one degree or another. And then just your general infrastructure has to be able to handle it. You know, society, your general society as a whole has to be able to handle it. Otherwise, it's a recipe for disaster. And it is good to see that more and more people are starting to realise these things. It's not just a simple case of, yeah, come on, we've got some space, come and move in.
Well, here's an interesting story. Yesterday, the French Interior Minister, Manuel Valls, he went to an event, and he is the one in government most concerned about Jewish flight from France to Israel, which is becoming huge. It's a huge deal, huge deal. Many Jews have been leaving France over the last few years, and the number is growing and seems to be growing exponentially. It's very bad.
We know why.
Huh?
And we know why.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, he was decrying anti-Semitism. The number of attacks have gone up. Jews have been there their whole lives, feel completely unsafe, and he was decrying that. But you know, at the same day that you know, his country is taking more and more, his government is taking more and more refugees, and I tweeted to him in French, but I said, you know, it's nice to decry anti-Semitism, but don't you think you're actually importing the problem? I mean, this is, where do you think it's coming from? And so there seems to be an inability to want to recognize where it's coming from, and you know, and I think that's a real problem. I mean, it's completely idiotic, frankly. You know, most of this stuff is not coming from, you know, white Europeans. This is not the 1930s. There's a different dynamic in the air, and people just don't want to recognize that in Europe because it somehow makes them feel racist, etc. It's a ridiculous sort of attitude.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the problem's probably more prominent in Europe, but it's not. It's pretty much every westernized nation.
Yeah, at this point, yeah. It's a big problem. So, but look, I argued, you know, after Charlie Hebdo, right after, there's a lot of concern about, you know, Muslims being persecuted, etc. And you had all these Muslims going, you know, I shouldn't say Muslims in general, these representational groups, etc., that may or may not represent the majority of views. I don't know, but they claim to speak. You know, I have my doubts though. But they went on TV and they're like, you know, well, we're being persecuted in France, etc., in Europe. We're being persecuted. It's hard being a Muslim, and we feel unsafe. And I completely tore that apart. I was like, look, this is utter bullshit. Who are the real people being persecuted? Who are the real people fleeing Europe? Not coming in droves to Europe, fleeing Europe. It's Jews. Jews are the ones being persecuted, and it's being persecuted by those fucking bastards. Okay? Jews are the persecuted lot in Europe. There aren't reams of Muslims fleeing Europe in fear of their lives. They're coming to Europe. That doesn't actually just bespeak of a persecution complex in the Muslim community in Europe. That's a lot of bullshit, frankly. But who are the ones who really are fleeing Europe? By the thousands, not only in France, but in the UK, in Belgium, in Sweden, etc. It's Jews. So if you want to ask somebody about persecution in Europe right now, better fucking speak to Jews, not Muslims. I just got so pissed off. I still am pissed off about this argument because it's a lie.
I think I read this out to Sid a couple of days ago. We were in a hangout together when our Prime Minister announced that we were increasing, almost doubling our refugee intake to try and do what we can for this current problem. He explicitly stated that the government's main concern and priority are going to be those minorities, being the persecuted Christians, the Yazidis, and all that from those particular regions. That immediately caused an uproar and outcry within the Muslim community leaders. They're all coming out saying that language is divisive and he's being a bigot and a racist. And
I read that actually. Yeah,
it's just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That's just their reaction was outrageous, especially considering what the Yazidis went through.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like the Yazidis were fighting anyone before this. They didn't look for the trouble. You know.
Yeah. And I got called a racist asshole yesterday because I was having this conversation with someone, and I mentioned that, and then I also included the fact that a lot of these fleeing refugees, how many Arab countries do they walk through or walk past to get to where they somewhere else, because they know that these particular countries will not take them. They will kick them out and move them on.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They don't even care about.
Did you hear Saudi Arabia chided Europe for not taking in enough refugees, and Saudi Arabia has taken in 0 refugees.
And how many millions of tents do they have permanently set up that could easily house, you know, X amount of millions?
I know. Yeah, they basically said, yeah, you know, Europe should take in more refugees. It's wrong not to take them in. Blah blah. Saudi Arabia accepts 0 refugees. 0.
Yeah.
They can fuck off, frankly. You know. I don't care what they say. I know they're assholes anyway. I mean, who in their normal mind thinks that Saudi Arabia is like, you know, a fair player in any sense of the word? They're just assholes. Everybody knows.
That highlights hypocrisy, and that's where the majority of the narrative comes from. It comes out of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I agree.
They export literally billions and billions of dollars every year across the world, building mosques, Islamic schools, and all that sort of shit. They control or play a big part in controlling the narrative that comes out of all these local community leaders' mouths.
Yeah, I mean, so much so that even like moderate Muslims are complaining since years that they see their communities turning against moderation, blah blah blah. I mean, moderate imams who didn't preach hate, etc., have been completely sidelined and have been blasting Saudi Arabia for what they are doing with Wahhabi beliefs, etc., for indoctrinating people and recruiting them. I mean, it's not just, you know, Westerners saying, it's like the moderate Muslims themselves, the leaders themselves, have been completely sidelined and have been, you know, kind of shocked in a way. I can kind of respect that. Their shock and you know, amazement at it all.
Hello, Rob.
Oh, hi, how are you, mate?
Oh,
Sidney?
pretty good. Pretty good. Thanks for popping in. You're actually a very opportune moment. We just happened to be talking about your favorite subject.
Which is? Islam?
Shrimps on the barbie, mate. Shrimps on the barbie.
Yeah.
Damien from Brisbane, meet Rob from Melbourne.
There you go.
Okay,
And the
I'm
other
not the only fucking idiot up so early.
It was a bit of a battle.
Well, it's not that you didn't know about it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I knew.
Well, actually, if I'm going where I think I'm going in 2 months, I'll be up at this at your hour as well, pretty much the same hour to be on this show. So
excellent. So you don't go anywhere.
I'll join the ranks of fucking idiots.
Yeah. So don't go to any time zone which is inappropriate for this show. Okay. Thank you.
You mean which is appropriate? We'll have a majority of fucking idiots on here. It'll be great.
Well, nothing would have changed then. Rob, I want to introduce you to everybody as the only known author on this hangout.
Yeah, that's right. I wrote a book called "What Is This Thing Called God?"
What is this thing called God?
Yep.
Doesn't that sort of undermine the value of actual things? Just saying.
Yeah. Well, it's I regard it as, if I can find you again. Hang on, I've lost you.
Oh, we can hear you. Well, I can hear you.
Oh, I've talked to you before. I remember your profile page. It was a while ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been off the air for a bit.
I can tell you what this thing called God is. His name is Jesus. He's a bit of a carpenter. Got some skills there, you know. He took shop class in high school. He's, of course, a Caucasian male with a long beard. Died on the cross, saved all of humanity from sins because we're garbage and we can't do anything right. That's God.
No, well, no, you're wrong. That's Jesus that you're talking about, but I'm not sure that all of those stories about Jesus' character are accurate. Now, this thing called God is he lives up in the sky.
Well, hold on a second. You said you're not sure that they're accurate. They're in the Bible. How are you? They're in the Bible. It's true.
Yeah, well, the Bible's got a lot of problems.
Whoa, there are no.
Let me just
zero problems in the
I
Bible.
have this book. That's it.
Yeah.
End of argument. I have this book.
Ah, you don't, because I have this book. And if I have this book, you don't have this book. Ha 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 ha!
I think all of you are wrong. The real truth lies in the Elysian mysteries, and I think that Rome really is what we should be following. The old Roman gods.
Well, no. Let's get back.
That's mythology. What are you talking about? Old Roman gods?
Yeah, well, we nailed your god up to a fucking cross.
That's what
Like
I'm gonna
Zeus?
say.
Well,
Seriously?
Your fucking God on a cross is nothing more than a prophet of my God, Allah.
How are you, how am I supposed to take this Zeus guy seriously? I mean, a guy that gets pregnant with a kid inside of his thigh,
sorry,
that's ridiculous.
No,
My God impregnated a virgin without taking her virginity, and she pushed the baby out without breaking her hymen, and that's my God, because that makes perfect sense.
I don't find this to be amazing at all. First of all, Zeus was Greek, not Roman, and we all know the Romans were better. So we're talking about Jupiter, and essentially he went around, fucking women. He didn't have to get them. He didn't have to impregnate them without fucking them. I appreciate the fact that he fucked them. See, I like that. It's manly of him. I think your God's kind of a pussy and a wimp for not actually wanting to sleep with the girls.
So you
at least
worship
have the
an
decency to
idolater.
give him a good night to remember.
You worship a lustful idolater who cheats on his wife.
Yes.
What's wrong with this? I don't understand the problem.
Yeah, what's the problem?
Okay, have you read the 10 Commandments? The 7th one is "Thou shalt not commit adultery."
Yeah, I don't care what that says. I don't care what that says. You know what? Instead of discussing that, I can just go sacrifice like a black ewe, and be forgiven of all my transgressions, and the gods will be appeased. I'm cool with that. I don't have to discuss the ins and outs of any philosophy. I can just make a deal with God.
Let me take this from the ridiculous to something more sort of realistic, and let me ask Rob this question. Rob, can Allah, the God of Islam, can Allah be appeased?
It doesn't exist.
Ah, there you go. Now,
There's nothing to be appeased.
it's true. Well, and I'm not arguing against you about this, but I'm only one person, and I'm not a billion people.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So the thing is, I know that, and you know that.
Yeah.
But how do we get the billion people who can't even contemplate that concept to accept?
Yeah. And that's the key problem here. How do you crack through belief? Belief in itself is just a non-event.
Right.
It just truly is. All through, just belief in and of itself is nothing. If it were knowledge, you'd be able to demonstrate it in some way sensorially, but with belief you can't, and that's why you call it a belief. And it's not only religious beliefs that are a problem in this world. people have beliefs about themselves, we call them egos, that are inaccurate, and they cause all manner of problems. So the big problem is how do you actually crack through that veneer and get a person that holds beliefs. I'm just reading your sign. Secular. Yeah, okay. So the real problem becomes, how do you actually break through that veneer of belief? And it's a difficult nut to crack. So that's something I'm interested in discussing, because I talk quite often with Muslims and Christians, and I know that I've got an evidence-based argument, but it's almost like the blinkers come on when you get to the evidence that they can't respond to. Certain behaviours start to emerge, and they're common across the whole group. So I regard the problem of belief as a single, relatively simple phenomena, but a very difficult one to crack.
Actually, it's not. I disagree. But the solution that history demonstrates is the least desirable for anybody on our side to even contemplate. We refuse to actually even discuss it. And I understand why. I completely understand why. But it's a taboo subject to even discuss, because it's not a realistic thing that any of us would support. But look.
Sorry, can you just restate that? I didn't really quite catch your point.
Well, I'll tell you what the solution is, but it's going to sound like I'm a monster, because I don't advocate this, and none of us here would, and nobody that I know of in the atheism movement would. But look, as somebody who was born Jewish, who's an atheist, even an anti-theist, somebody who lives in Israel, somebody who half of his family suffered through the Holocaust, I can tell you that the way people eventually lose belief is that you beat them up enough times for enough years, you crush them long enough that only a minority will retain their beliefs zealously, but the rest will say, you know what, this just isn't working. Look at the Jews. Look what happened to the Jews. Most are agnostic or atheist. Why? Because of what they suffered through 2 millennia of being fucked over and over again. So much so that they just looked around and said, you know what, maybe God isn't protecting us. That's what happened to the Jewish community. They got savaged for so long and so hard that most of them just said, you know what, God isn't actually protecting us. This is all just a load of bullshit. And in fact, when communism came around, they were strong proponents of not only communist belief, but also atheist beliefs, and which is why the first Zionists, many of the first Zionists to Israel, were actually atheists and communists. And why most Israelis and most Jews in the world today are atheists and communists. And look at the number of people who believed in God before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust. Jews went through a tremendous soul searching after the Holocaust, and most came to a realization or a belief or the opinion that, you know what, it didn't protect us. God didn't protect us, that he could let this happen to us and do nothing. And that, my friends, is how you get rid of belief. From the Romans over to the Nazis. Now, again, I'm not advocating this for any people to go through. Obviously, it happened to my family, it happened to a lot of people in the country I'm in. We all know how horrific it is, but that is, in essence, how most of the Jews lost their belief.
So let me get this straight. The polar bear wants another Holocaust.
Yeah, that's right. This will be taken so out of context. But, I don't give a shit.
All right. Okay.
I just don't give a shit. If people are too fucking stupid to understand my point, that's their problem. I'm not running for office. They can go fuck off.
Yeah.
Well,
Rob's made a good point. I mean, how do you get to that point with 1 billion people?
Yeah, without killing a hell of a lot of people. Yeah.
Is there
how do you do it ideologically? Go ahead, Rob.
It's very
Go ahead.
difficult. It's going to take a long time.
I still think my idea of dropping bacon and porn on all of the Islamic countries is the best way to go. They'll realize how awesome bacon and porn is.
No. First of all, they
know all about porn. Let me assure you.
they're one of the biggest consumers of porn on the internet. In fact.
Yeah, but they watch weird shit though.
No. They actually regular porn too. No, the numbers show regular porn as well as other stuff. No, but the bacon they won't touch anyway. I mean, because it's a communal thing.
But just hide it. Like hide it in like some food that they have, and like, because first of all, you can put bacon in anything. First of all, so
you
just like
bacon in me.
Take some of. Take some of their traditional dishes and fucking throw bacon in there because that's the most American thing to do. And they'll eat it. They'll be like, "Oh, this is
as
great."
an American, you're an absolute minority on this hangout.
Wait. Are you telling me that if some food dropped randomly from the sky, the source of which you have no idea, you're starving enough to pick it up off the street and eat it?
I'm not starving. It's just free food. It's just free fucking food.
I don't think most people would do that unless they're like literally starving.
Well, most people are fucking.
Okay. The Monty Python section of this hangout should come to an end. Let's get back to Rob. I'm interested in how we're going to defeat Islam, Rob. Because now Allah is nonsense. Doesn't exist, right?
Correct.
My name is. Yeah, go ahead.
Something that Nathaniel said, because it's interesting to me. I'm always looking for, is there a silver bullet here that you can deal with belief? And what he said that it was God letting them down that was the key to the shift. Is that right, Nathaniel?
Yes, essentially. Yeah.
So how can you manufacture that situation intellectually without having to kill people? I wonder if there's a possibility or a way of showing people that God's going to fail them. Now, the death event, we could wait till then so they can find out for themselves, but that's too long. We need something a bit more closer to the now or to the moment. So the question becomes, is there some way that you could convince someone that all these hopes that they've invested in this God just aren't going to materialize?
Well, ironically, this is the real irony of it, right? If you look at World War II, the irony is the Jews weren't the only ones to experience this. The other people who experienced this, ironically, were the Nazis, because they truly believed in the Führer. Truly believed. I mean, most of them willingly gave their lives for him.
Yeah, like a king.
And what it took to change that, to change the idea that he was some sort of demigod almost, was essentially the near complete destruction of German society. The constant pounding of and the bombing of the destruction of their entire world around them, crumbling for essentially into a ruin that they eventually became so disillusioned. But that's what it took for them too, because they were only human as well, So that it's not just the failure of response. It's also the complete destruction of everything you hold dear that is key to that.
So let me get this straight. You want to round up some Nazis and then be Hitler. Then you want to turn around and be Pol Pot and exterminate your own people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I love how this could just be like somebody's banner tomorrow or something. But no, I mean I'm quite serious about this. Look at human psychology, and look what it took to change people's minds in certain set beliefs. And it's not just set beliefs is cultural identity. That's what we're talking about. It's that extreme of a response that it took to change their minds. So my vision of it is not exactly positive. I mean, it's not very rosy. I don't see a way out for a long time. And I since I don't want to do anything on this scale to anybody that is innocent, I would never advocate that sort of thing. I think it will take a lot longer than that even.
But again, you said something interesting. What was it again? You said
everything I say by default is interesting.
Yeah. and that's a key to help me remember. What was happening, or at least the way I heard it, was that the self, the individuals, were let down, and that was the big trigger. The ego mind had a concept of the world that wasn't matching up with reality, and so that's the key point. So then the question becomes, because I'm pretty sure that God is an ego mind thing, it just sits in the ego mind. It has no basis in reality.
Oh, you Freudian. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but it's this self-interest, because there's a great little saying. I love it. It says a lot for me. It comes from the Cherokees. Well, apparently it comes from the Cherokees, so I don't know whether it did for sure. An old Cherokee told his grandson there is a battle between two wolves inside us all. One is evil, it is anger, jealousy, greed, resentment, inferiority, lies, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, love, peace, hope, humility, kindness, empathy, and truth. So you got these two wolves having a battle. The boy thought about what his grandfather had just told him and asked, "Grandfather, which wolf wins?" And said the old man quietly replied, "The one you feed." So here we have this situation of an ego mind, or an ego, selfish sort of element in humans, and you have this nurturing, good-natured sort of self, and they're at odds at times. So when I think of this dilemma of religion, I think of those two wolves, and I think of the God factor sitting squarely with the evil wolf, or the ego mind, or the self. And the question then becomes, well, how do you get people to wake up to the real world? How do you
everybody knows how the gods can be appeased by sacrificing virgins to them. So, or a black ewe, as I mentioned before, that seems to work rather well. I believe Apollo smiles upon that graciously. But no, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and yes, I agree. It's a completely psychological problem. But how do people change? This is going to take more than one person at a time, because the rate of growth, you'll never get rid. I mean, it'll grow faster than you can actually change people's minds one at a time. So obviously, the question really isn't how do you change, a particular person's mind. It's how do you change large swaths of people's minds.
Yes.
And that without war and destruction and horrific things happening. It's exceedingly rare in the extreme to ever see that happening when you're talking about an entire culture that thrives on such zealotry, that is defined by such zealotry.
Yeah, I understand the magnitude that we're dealing with, but the problem is the same, regardless of the individual. It's the same event going on in each person that belongs to a religion.
Right, but whereas you can argue, you can possibly, I mean, it's happened many times. Most atheists were religious, so you can argue some people out of position But you can't argue a billion people out of a position. That can't happen. You can't even usually argue 10 people at the same time out of position. I mean, it might have happened a few times, but it's exceedingly rare. I mean, how likely is it to argue 1,000 people out of a position or 100,000? It's the failure rate goes up essentially geometrically per person, I think, which is a problem.
Yeah, I think we face a worse problem if we don't deal with it, because Islam, well, my take on Islam is that they're really trying to push, for, world participation levels. So.
Oh, I completely agree. I think we have to try, but I don't know what the solution is, like you. I haven't figured out the answer, and I don't think anyone else has either. If not, we would be seeing progress. Yeah.
True.
Burn and bacon, you motherfucker.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know what? We should just try it. In fact, I think that whoever the fucking head general of the U.S. military is, they need to just comply to my commands. I know what the fuck I'm doing. I've been the leader of a Rust clan for 2 weeks now. I know how to handle this tactical bullshit.
I know you're actually a bit young to remember in detail the invasion of Iraq, the beginning of it. Most likely you're a bit young for that.
Well, I learned about
13 years ago now,
history class.
Yeah, in history class for me, it was never a history. It was like living moment. But there was actually a general who shot his mouth off at some point during the invasion, right after while we were occupying, and basically mentioned that we should bury terrorists in pigskins, essentially, to discard them. And he got fired because there was this huge outcry and people were very upset and angry, etc. So
I'm not talking about dropping bacon on them. Put bacon in the food, drop it on the side of the road.
No. You mentioned like just putting bacon anywhere near the Middle East, and they'll get pissed off enough to get the administration to
But
fire
eventually,
you.
eventually.
Hold on a second. Why don't we just drop a whole bunch of bacon on Europe?
But here's the thing. Eventually,
they'll clear Europe. All the Muslims will clear right out of Europe.
Oh, that's a good idea right there.
But eventually, one of them is going to eat it, and hopefully it'll be like a highfalutin imam or something like that, and they'll say, Yusuf, this isn't that bad.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's definitely not going to happen.
This infidel swine is rather delicious.
He'll get fucking drawn and quartered by the mom. Trust me, it's not going to happen.
There's another question I have for you, Rob, about Islam, and that is, I think Islam actually survives because of its brutality and the fear factor amongst the people who profess to be Muslim. If they have any questions, if they have any doubts, they aren't really free to express them, because if they do, they're liable to be shot, killed, whatever. Now, isn't that like the biggest barrier to progress?
Yeah, that's interesting, that comment, because I just recently picked up on that there is a strong fear factor in Islam, and it's in the documents. They document it.
Yeah.
If you leave, basically you're dead. That's the
yeah. If you leave, but if you just you say something. If I was living in in Jeddah, and I said, and my name is, let's say, was Rafe Badawi, and I wrote a blog saying that I think that religious law in Saudi Arabia should be relaxed quite a bit.
That's not what he didn't even say that. he said I support the Prophet in all these things, but I support him a little bit less in that. And that was enough to get him.
Now, what happened to him is 10 years in jail and 1,000 lashes. Okay, so that's one person with a lot of balls who went and said that. Now, how many people as a percentage of the population, want to say that, think that, but just can't because,
And
you know,
to me,
dangerous.
therein lies the problem. And I don't think fear is a bigger stumbling block. But all religions use fear as a major tactic. But to me, the biggest stumbling block is governments. When governments make religion insignificant when it comes to policy making, a lot starts changing. And then if governments were to eliminate all the special privileges that they grant religions, all of these religious people would no longer have power, and which would include the power they feel within themselves to do what they're doing. Because they would no longer have these special privileges. To me, that's the biggest stumbling block.
Oh, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to add one thing, since I was throwing everybody under the bus, Jews, Muslims, the Nazis even. I was throwing. You can actually see the effect of it as well in World War I with Christians. The reason why Europe today is so atheist, so non-believing, which it wasn't 150 years ago. 150 years ago, most people in Europe believed in God. The fact. But World War I, there had been slow disillusionment over the centuries since, the 30 Years' War, etc. But essentially, that really started the real disillusionment. But you had fanatics and zealots still everywhere in Europe. They weren't immune. What put a nail in the coffin of religion in Europe was World War I. You can see the soul searching in Europe after World War I, during the war and after the war. Okay, with the poetry that they were writing, with the beliefs that they were starting to have, with the philosophy that they created, deconstructionism, etc. All this was a product of World War I, which is something that Americans and others who did not live in Europe at the time will never understand. World War I is not, the horrors of World War I are not part of the American culture. No American truly understands unless they have studied it in university or something. All the imagery of the gas masks, the poppy fields, etc., that all came not from World War II, but World War I. That was the real horror that completely took apart European society and essentially turned it into a non-believing atheist society that it is today, for the most part, and to the secular society, because before it was religiously supported. All the kings and queens had religious mandates. That no longer is the case, and that is really a result of the First World War. The Second World War essentially, killed off any remnants of believers, of true believers, I should say. But that all was a product of the horrors, the massacres, the complete utter chaos of World War I. So they too suffered through this, and as a result, lost their belief. And since they were mostly Christian, you could say that's how you got rid of most Christianity in Europe, Western Europe.
Essentially, what you're saying though is that God failed them or let them down in their mind's eye, so they dropped him.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. They went through utter hell. There's no denying it. And,
so here's what kind of strikes me as surprising, though, is that with the Muslims in the Middle East. First they had the Russians fucking with them, and now we are still fucking with them, but they haven't dropped God yet. They've been fucked with basically continuously by some of the most powerful armies in the world for, what is it, going on 50 years now?
Yeah, but they have not, as bad as their lives are and military.
They certainly haven't dealt with World War I type shit or World War II type shit.
Not even close. People go on about this, how horrible it is and what we did to to the Iraqis, blah blah blah. They you know, compared to World War I, it was a fucking cakewalk. It still is. Okay, the Iraqis,
I
as
think
bad
that's
as what
easy to
they're
get to them.
suffering, and Syria, as bad as what they're suffering, is not on the scale of World War I. No, not even close. Okay, and
I
people
think I can
who
answer.
people who
You wanna
make the
see my
claim
pretty
that,
face,
you know,
Sid?
they're suffering more don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're idiots. So, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you know,
Yeah.
your kids getting blown up with drones isn't quite as bad as them getting killed with mustard gas.
No, it's not.
I
No,
think
it's
I
not
can
just
answer
that.
that, Kenny.
It's not. Huh?
I think I can answer that, Kenny's question. And I think Islam is a perfect example of the more fundamentalist or the more devout a Muslim is, the more narcissistic they become. And a classic trait of narcissism is never taking responsibility. So when you extend that to their religion or their God, all this terrible shit that might be happening to them is never their fault. So there's always somebody else to blame, and that's how they keep that faith, that level of faith.
100% correct. I mean, you pick that up in the arguments. You know, if you go and have a Facebook argument with a Muslim, and you point out the history of war and Islam, you know, how it's basically been at war since it's been created. The first reaction you get is, "Oh, but what about the Christians?" You know, and just don't want to talk anymore about Islam's flaws. And that's just such a common thing.
And that's typical of all totalitarian ideologies, and you need to really get into it and subscribe to it, and that you first off need to be narcissistic. That's exactly the same for all these radical feminists. Their ideology is totalitarianism. All these social justice warriors, yeah, they're all the same. You actually can't be a social justice warrior if you're not narcissistic.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's true, actually, in a sense, yeah. Yeah.
I think that should hopefully answer Kenny's question.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, like, I just find it kind of strange that, I mean, obviously there are differences in how the religion is structured, but Islam and Christianity are very similar. It's like one of the fundamental differences, though, is you kill off a bunch of, say, Christians in Europe, they become atheists. You kill off a bunch of Muslims in the Middle East, and the ones left over want to become terrorists. It's kind of odd.
Okay, here's the difference, though. There are fundamental differences between Christianity and Islam. I mean, really fundamental differences. I mean, they go. So many people go around saying they're the same on both sides of the divide. It's amazing.
Well, no, they're not exactly the same. I mean, I'm
I know, but
talking...
no, I totally understand your point. But the problem is, Christianity started in a sense as a religion of the oppressed, but accepting the oppression, because the oppression was just a portal to the way of God, to the light of God. Islam did not accept the oppression. He did at first for 10 years, and he said, "Fuck it, I'm not getting anywhere." So his answer was, "Let's just kill everybody who's in my way." So it's a completely different start of the religion. I mean, it's a completely different premise of the religion. This is why Christianity actually grew in the Roman Empire mostly amongst the slaves. It was literally a religion of the lowest order in the Roman Empire at first. This is why it was so mocked in the Roman Empire, because it was like, if you're a Christian, it meant you were probably a slave, or you were the guy who collected the piss in the tannery, that sort of thing. This was not something that most elitist Romans on the higher levels ever wanted to associate with. Okay.
Right.
Such was not the case with Islam. Islam essentially went around quote-unquote freeing people, but then they became the dominant majority instantly the moment they were freed and started oppressing others. This was not like you know, a quiet undergrowth movement that essentially won over in an ideological
Well, no, because
way.
the prophet of Islam was a warmonger, whereas the prophet of Christianity, or the main one, Jesus,
Right.
wasn't a warmonger. But I'm talking from the point of the Muslims that are saying Islam's a religion of peace and Allah will provide, and they don't have the violence as ingrained as some of the other ones might.
Yeah, this is all cognitive dissonance, though.
You would think that they would do the same thing the Europeans did during these
No.
times of war.
No, because there are clear indicate. Because in Islam, if you're not winning a battle, it is your fault. Christianity doesn't say anything
Okay.
about battles. It doesn't
Build
say
better
anything about war.
Build better
Okay.
bombs.
Yeah, but if you look at it from the point of view, if you look at both religions from the point of view of cults of personality,
Mm-hmm.
are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right. That's exactly what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And Rome, well, here's my take on Christianity. It was born firstly by Paul, the Pharisee. He
Mhm.
started it, and that was a move to try and regain the people that left Judaism to follow this Jesus character.
Mhm.
But it got a real spurt, or it became an identity in its own right, with the birth of the New Testament, which was in 70 AD, and that was by a guy called Nerva. He's an emperor, or he
Mhm.
later became an emperor.
Yeah.
He worked for the Flavian dynasty, and if you look up his track record, you find that the guy was given two very prestigious awards. You know, there are awards at the level of what the soldiers used to get, or the generals used to get, coming back from big victories.
Yes, the triumphs. I know. I know about Nerva. I know about the Roman Empire. By the way, I'm very familiar with
Oh,
it.
okay.
So,
So
yeah.
I don't know whether you
I
take.
think one of the
I don't know whether you agree with the view that Nerva is actually the author or leader.
I know that's a theory out there. You know what? I really need a heaping load of evidence for that. I know that's a theory out there, and I understand the arguments for it. But yeah, that's a real okay. Like people can make that claim, but I don't think enough evidence has ever been found to even come close to making that sort of acceptable to me as acceptable history.
Have you read Caesar's Messiah?
No, but I've heard of the book.
Yeah, that's worth reading. That'll perhaps swing you around a bit. But anyway, I don't want to get caught up on that. I just wanted to make the point. What I'm saying is that the Roman Empire was the reason that we have Christianity. So it's very much the Roman Empire's Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. Well, it was at first it was the Catholic Church. Essentially, was the no, because the Eastern churches also existed before that. But essentially, the way Christianity spread in the West was through the empire, and in a sense, the Pope is still the continuation of the Roman Emperor.
That's right, and that's
and his traditions go back to the red shoes go back to the Roman Emperor.
Yep.
A lot of it goes back to the Roman Emperor, so it's really Rome still lives in a sense through the Pope. As much as I think that's a horrific notion, because I respect the Romans far more than I respect the Pope. But no.
Oh yeah, it's the empire. It's not the people. The people aren't the problem. The people aren't the problem. It's the empires that are the problem. I mean, you can go back to the Persian Empire, and they basically took over Judaism with the Book of Isaiah and faked prophecy, and there's a whole story to be told there. But come across to Islam, and I think you'll find that it's either the Persian Empire or the Arabian Empire, one of those two. I'm not sure because I haven't really researched it or got into detail, but pretty confident that they are behind Islam.
What, that Muhammad didn't exist?
Oh no, he exists. He was just the story that they built on, because in a cult of personality you need a human, and that human you then connect to God. Now in Muhammad's case, they connected him to God through Angel Gabriel, or through that story. That's a weakness that's really worth exploring, because we find, if we do our homework, that Angel Gabriel is born in a book called the Book of Daniel.
Right.
And the Book of Daniel, if you study that carefully and have a look at what the scholars are saying, scholars are saying is that it's a fabrication, it's a forgery. All the prophecies terminate in 160 BC, and it looks like the authorship of the book is around that particular time. Yale University have got an excellent piece out, but they're a little bit shy of the mark, but they're very close. But anyway, the bottom line is they faked this Book of Daniel, and this is the same book that we first hear of this Angel Gabriel. So if that is a fact, and I'm pretty confident that it is, then it means that the story of Muhammad in a cave with Angel Gabriel is, as we would expect, as people that don't believe in these things, as we would expect, it's a fabrication.
The concoction.
No, I couldn't. There's no way I could buy into that theory. Not with tremendous amount of proof. I just don't.
That the Angel Gabriel is a fabrication?
No,
But doesn't the book prove itself?
No, stop, Teddy. I swear, I'm gonna slap you, man. No, here's the thing. I'll tell you. I don't buy into theories that religions can get invented and spread. I don't think it can work that way. I think that essentially the only way for religions to truly get spread by so many people at once, and remember, we're talking about the success of Islam, which was humongous on a geographical scale.
Right.
The only way for that to happen is essentially from the ground up. It's essentially a revolution. And I don't believe that it can actually be manufactured.
In other words, kill all the dissenters.
No, I just don't. I don't think that it's possible to. It's like saying, well, communism was manufactured by the Rothschilds or something. I don't think the communist revolution could have happened without actually a grassroots movement of believers that essentially had there been a hint of anyone like having made this up, had there been like just the bare mention of the idea, they would have come across it and they would have completely eviscerated. Either they would have been absolutely disillusioned and crushed, or they would have talked about it and created either a new a sort of philosophy out of it, or a political revolution. I just don't believe that these sorts of things can happen via conspiracy by creation, by a few people.
I'll give you two things to think about. You familiar with Constantine?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of an impact do you think he had on Christianity?
Well, I know what impact he had. All of Europe became, even the East became Christian overnight, literally.
And he's an emperor, right?
Yeah, but there was no way to. I mean, we all know about this. Obviously, it couldn't have been done in a conspiratorial way. He used his decree to essentially say, he didn't technically decree, but everybody said, okay, well, the emperor is Christian, now I'm a Christian too. I mean, yeah, that's fine, but that's not a surreptitious thing. You're talking about creating a religion surreptitiously.
You're familiar with North Korean story?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the Kims.
It's a long time, in fact, yeah.
The Kims? Yeah.
Yeah, my involvement with Link and other organizations goes back decades, so yeah.
Yeah, but again, what you've got is an empire ship, if you like. Bunch
Yeah,
of
no,
leaders
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
got together. They've cooked up a story. It's not true,
Right.
and they
I know that. Yeah.
influenced the whole population.
Right, but it wasn't done in a surreptitious way. We know about it. Anybody outside of North Korea knows about this. Like there was no there was no hiding the fact. You know, huh?
The cult of personality that Rob was mentioning. This is what he's trying to point out, I think.
No, I'm not denying that people can create cults of personality, but what I'm denying, without a lot of proof, is that you could essentially manufacture, like a small group of people could manufacture the Christian religion or the Muslim religion and essentially spread it through surreptitious means so that, you know, the majority of population, it just catches on fire. I just don't believe that's possible. I just don't believe that essentially history works that way.
What is possible, though, is it can start small with a small amount of doctrine or stories attached to it, and then as it gradually gets told, more gets added to it, and then in a relative short space of time, and I'm talking maybe a couple of generations for argument's sake, all of a sudden you've got this massive story to tell. That absolutely definitely can happen.
Yeah, but no, that's not what I'm talking. Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. No, because we know the history. Look, the history of Islam is exceedingly well documented. I mean, because the problem with Islam really is that it, you know, by the time. A lot of it's based on
assumption too. There's basically no real more evidence of Muhammad existing than Jesus existing, and we all
we know he existed. He had sent letters to other rulers at the time. He had sent ambassadors, etc., and with letters of friendship, etc., of exchanging gifts. We know he was a real person. They responded to him, either making allies or ignoring him or saying, no, I don't accept you, blah, blah, blah. No, we know that he was a real person just through historical evidence from other cultures at that time, who essentially responded to his ambassadors, etc.
Do we have those letters?
Yeah, I believe that there are actually some letters that involve or that we found evidence of, tablets, etc., of kings responding to him or his ambassadors, bringing gifts, etc. I mean, we know these things actually happened.
Because I'll admit I haven't looked a huge amount into it, but what little I have looked into it, I haven't found any of that. In fact, what you can find in, say, the first 100 years or whatever of the formation of Islam, you really struggle to find any actual reference in a lot of these different lands where Islam spread of Muhammad himself.
No, wait a minute.
Muhammad started after that.
No, the entire Sunni-Shia divide, the entire war of succession, it happened literally moments after Muhammad dies, because of Ali.
I know the story of Islam. I'm quite familiar with it.
That wouldn't have happened unless there was a real succession in contention. The only way for that to happen is that there was a real ruler who appointed one over the other. I mean, it wouldn't. If there were two competing tribes, they wouldn't say it's a war of succession of right. They would just say, well, I want to kill. They'd say what everybody else in history has said about two competing tribes. I have a reason to kill them, but they wouldn't list succession unless there was actually something to succeed.
Hey, I just wanted to say bye because I got to go now.
All right, you take care.
Good show as always, guys.
I still got a class later.
We'll see you next week.
Yep, most definitely.
I understand what you're saying, and for the most part, I can agree. But where I'll throw a spanner into the works is: was it a succession of a person, or was it a succession of an idea?
I don't think they had successions of ideas back then. I don't think that was even possible to. It wasn't even in the mindset.
For me, a lot of this stuff is all going to be proved. It's claimed. It's definitely claimed.
No, I think it's proved by just history alone. There's way more evidence that Muhammad existed than Jesus ever existed. That's for sure. I mean, that's actually a problem. That's one of the big problems with Islam, because we know the history of it. It's really hard for them to honestly deny some of these things that happened. Now I'll admit there are some murky areas, because essentially, it wasn't very good historical records kept at that time, but there were historical records kept at that time, even better than the Romans, and that's saying quite a bit. So I'm not going to buy into the idea that he was a manufactured figure. I think we know full well that he wasn't. I think that, again, the wars of succession themselves prove the point, and you wouldn't have it. You might have two competing tribes, but then they would have used different reasons. But they themselves said it's a war of, essentially succession, of lineage, of who has the right to succeed Muhammad. And it wasn't like an ideological right. It was, to them, it was actually a right of rulership. It wasn't like I think the direction, you know what it's like.
Yeah, I know the basic story
Yeah.
is the bloodline, essentially.
Right.
I'm well aware of that. But
Yeah.
you know,
I don't think you
actually-
could have that. Yeah, I don't think you could have it without there being a person involved.
Actually, my daughter, I look for something to do. I might look into, see all the evidence that can be dug up, and then see whether it's actual evidence or just claimed evidence.
Sure. Go ahead. I think you'll find that it's pretty darn solid that he was actually a real person.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it is. But I'll find it.
I think he was a real person. Not only that, he was a real arsehole.
Yeah.
But
No club there.
If he was a real person, he is one of the biggest monsters to have ever walked the face of the earth. I don't think anyone would dispute
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
well, he's a nightmare for humanity, or at least. But again, I haven't done the research, but just looking at the Quran, that's very much a structured cult of personality document, and not done by any, any single individual. I don't think. There's a lot of thought that's gone into that, into locking people into this cult, and with strategies to block them from leaving, and all manner of efforts gone into that. Now, I know with high confidence that Angel Gabriel doesn't exist, but not just because I don't believe in angels, but because there's evidence on the ground that says it was a fabricated story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got scholarship backing. So Angel Gabriel, we can take that, that's not real. So someone has used that as the means of connecting this figure, this human, to God. Mm-hmm. That's very much a cult of personality tactic.
Here, look, there's actually a Wikipedia page called Historicity of Muhammad.
I got it up.
And there's a very important, one of the first paragraphs after it's the third one down, tells you straight out, this is also what I've read in the past. I don't remember the names offhand, but it's very brief. There are also non-Muslim sources written in Greek, Syriac, Armenian, and Hebrew by the Jewish and Christian communities. These non-Muslim written sources go back to about 636 AD. And many of the interesting ones date to within some decades later. One attributed to a 7th century Armenian scholar, Sebios, states that Muhammad was a merchant and that his preaching revolved around the figure of Abraham. There are also confirmations of Muhammad's migrations from Mecca to Medina in them. However, they also contain some essential differences with regard to Muslim sources, and in particular about chronology and about Muhammad's attitude towards Jews in Palestine. And there's more. There's a lot more in terms of sources. Then they have a whole section on Muslim sources, non-Muslim sources, after the Muslim sources. So there are actually written accounts from other people at the time from varying communities, it seems, of Muhammad's existence. So I really don't think that it's questionable that he did exist. I mean, I think it's quite clear that in any historian view that he was actually a real person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that certain events did happen. Now, they may debate the chronology of them, but that doesn't mean that the person wasn't real.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'd actually prefer that if he was, because then that makes it easier for us to argue against it.
I know, but you gotta take
against the ideology.
Yeah, but you gotta take the evidence as it is, and yeah, it seems it's a rather lengthy page. A very interesting page. They list a lot of references, etc. I suggest people look it up. It's just called Historicity of Muhammad. It's on Wikipedia. So you can go through it yourself. It'll list the Arabic sources from the Quran and the Hadith, etc., and non-Arab sources.
Yeah, I still have a strong sense, and again without research, that the Persian Jews might have somehow been involved. Because if you go and I have had a look at something which I thought was quite interesting. And this ties in with the Book of Revelations. So, in the Book of Revelations, there's a story in the third woe about people getting such a massacre that there was blood up to the nostrils of horses. Well, in the Jewish Talmud, we see in the third historical war between Rome and the Jews, there's mention in there of the massacre and blood up around the horses' nostrils. I thought, oh, gee, that's interesting. We've got one record coming from the Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, I think it was, talking about this blood coming up to the horses' bridles, and then here we have it in this Book of Revelations.
Yeah, that was just an expression that was commonly used. The same was also said about the taking of Jerusalem by the Crusaders. That was literally one of the lines they used, and that was during the Middle Ages.
Ah, right.
So it was not an uncommon. They would commonly say about most battles, especially massacres. Blood up to their armpits, blood up to their noses. Blood. It was a common reference back then. Remember, they were essentially, you're talking about an oration that in a society that was mostly illiterate. So they used common references to call up things consistently over time that essentially were not changed for hundreds of years because they were just very useful. And you'll still get those same things today when they're talking about if you talk to let's say a storyteller, if you listen to a storyteller in the streets of the Shuk in Tehran or something, who uses the same exact wording, the same exact stories that they've been telling for 1,000 years. They'll still use little colloquialisms like that they used 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, because it's just calling up a particular image. That's a very normal thing. And then
but it was a reference to the third battle historically, and in the Book of Revelations, the terminology was used against the third woe. But where it's interesting for me is that let's assume that the Book of Revelations is written after the fact, so sometime 136 AD or thereabouts. What happens? Some interesting things begin to happen. You now have this mountain that explodes in a real. You can use that story in Revelations and line it up with Vesuvius, because Vesuvius goes up in 89 AD. All of a sudden, some historical events start to all fit into the Revelation story, and the beast, we can pin down to Nero and.
Well, no, we know. Yeah, it's mostly talking about Nero and the Roman Empire. We know that. I mean, that's not really, you know.
Well,
I mean, I know people go into it so much because they're religiously inclined, but they're just fantastically wrong.
It's fabrication of prophecy, though. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
so,
and always keep in mind that when in the Bible, when Jesus mentions basically the end times, he's meaning it to happen within their lifetime, so within 10 years, 15 years, or whatever. So,
yeah, well, that all fits in. But the story I wanted to get to was, if you look at those three sets of wars, and then you look at the aftermath, what you get is there's a story, and you can Google this, it's up there, but you get this story of conflict between the Persian Jews and the Persian Empire and Rome. There's this ongoing battle between those two forces. And the really interesting thing about that history of war between these two sides is that it terminates at around 630 or around 630 AD. And that's the time that Islam starts. And all of a sudden we don't have that conflict going on anymore. What happens from that point forward is Islam is at war with the Roman Empire.
Right, but it's I would not put a conspiracy behind that at all. I mean, I just think that essentially that's just a natural evolution of conflict in the area and fighting against what was the predominant power since a long time. I mean, remember Rome ruled the Middle East for hundreds of years by that point. If anybody was going to fight anybody in that area, they would eventually be fighting Rome. There was nobody else that was bigger, in a sense. I mean, not in Arabia, but Arabia was essentially useless for the most part to Rome. So they did venture to Arabia. They had parts of it occupied for a while, but it was essentially like it was not exactly lucrative for them to be there. So.
Yeah, but why did the Persian conflict stop?
I think that's easy to explain in a historical context because, as you said, Persia and the Roman Empire had been at each other for so long, plus the occasional advance of other peoples. By the time you're talking, the Roman Empire had basically been cut in half. It only existed. The eastern half was the only remaining. So I'm talking like the region of Turkey and all that area, and even then they were pretty weak as an empire. They were extremely weak. Then comes the marching of the Muslim armies. Rome was ripe. Well, the Roman Empire was ripe to be finished off at that point. They were weak, they didn't have the funds to stand up again, and almost anybody would have walked in and knocked them over. Yeah. Which is essentially exactly what the Muslim armies did. Now, and that continued for a fair while to the stage where around the turn of the new millennia, I'm talking roughly here, they then had to reach out to Europe for help, which triggered the start of the Crusades.
Yeah, but I first of all, I hate calling Byzantium Rome because to me it's just so different than what Rome is. But anyway,
yeah, it wasn't even Rome.
It was Rome, and I understand it's a continuation of Rome, blah blah blah. But it's not. It's kind of like no, in a way, no. But anyway, because my Rome was never polluted by Christianity. Thank you. My Rome had fucking balls, and they were great, and they were admirable in so many ways. But I'm sorry, I just cannot buy into these conspiracy theories. I just don't think that it's actually feasible. I don't think that
Nathaniel, that's a bad choice of words because It's not a although yes, I suppose in one sense it is joining the dots, but the evidence is on the ground. That was the true historical record that the Persians, or Persian Jews, were fighting with Rome up until that point in time. That's on the record. There's no
right, but I don't think Persian Jews had that much power overall. I mean, we're not talking about an empire of Jews here. I mean, the Jews had been dealt with by the empire, and they weren't exactly. I mean, they had an influence in Persia in terms of you know, court physicians and advisors and counselors. It wasn't like you know, it wasn't like they were actually running the show. People say that they did, but it's absolutely not true. I mean, they were essentially. Yeah.
I should perhaps use the term Persian Empire because it starts back with the Book of Isaiah and Cyrus the Great. He took over Judaism.
I don't think they did.
That point, absolutely he did. From that point, from the Book of Isaiah forward... No, hang on, let me finish.
You need to give more evidence than just saying that he was in control of the land at the time. There needs to be evidence that he had some hand in writing Isaiah, which I don't think there is in it.
Well, have you heard of the Cirrus cylinder?
Talk to me about it.
Have you heard of it, or yes or no?
Just go ahead and talk to me about it.
Well, just say yes or no. Have you heard of it? Is it hard to answer that question?
Yep. I'm more interested in what you have to say.
Well, I'm interested in hearing your response, whether you're honest or not.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I'll let that slide. And now,
well, hold on. I got something to say about that. Why doesn't it matter? Why doesn't it matter?
It doesn't matter.
I personally have never heard of it. But
I'm more interested if he can back up the claim that he's making. So he's making a claim that Cyrus the Great was involved in the writing of Isaiah. It doesn't matter whether or not I've heard of the Cirrus cylinder.
Well, it does, because he's going to refer to it.
If he can refer to it, I know the Cirrus cylinder exists.
But you're being coy about answering a relatively simple question, and that sort of gets me wondering why you're doing that.
No, I mean, I know that you're referring to something that is actual when you're talking about the Cirrus cylinder. I want to know what you're talking about in relation to it. It doesn't matter whether or not I've heard of it if you're going to be making your point. Go ahead and prove your claim.
Right, now, so the Cirrus cylinder, and I'll read from it so that I'm not, making things up, or seem to be making things up. Just bear with me 1 second. Cirrus cylinder is a really interesting little piece of evidence because it's in clay, right? So it's not your average book, and it comes specifically from the times of Cyrus the Great. Now, this is a summary of the content on the cylinder itself. Lines 1 through 19. It's an introduction reviling Nabonidus. Now, Nabonidus was the Babylonian king that Cyrus defeated in the taking of Babylon. The previous king of Babylon, and associating Cyrus. Now, see here we have the cult of personality behavior. It says that on this tablet, Cyrus is associated with the god Marduk, who is the god of the Babylonians, which is important to remember. Lines 20 through 22, detailing Cyrus's royal titles and genealogy. If you study a lot of these religious documents, particularly around these key change events that occur through history, you'll notice that they always do genealogies. In the case of Cyrus's, the genealogy is the Book of Kings. And it goes on, and his peaceful entry into Babylon. So he's saying, in his account of things, all was good. There was no real tussle. Lines 22 to 34. So that's a signature to me of propaganda. Lines 22 to 34. A commendation of Cyrus's policy of restoring Babylon. So I'm the good guy in town now, and I'm going to restore Babylon. But hang on, you entered peacefully. What's going on there? Why do we need to restore it? The next line, 34 through 35, a prayer to Marduk. So now Cyrus, who's a Zoroastrian, and Cambyses, although that's ambiguous and people will argue it's religious heritage, we know for a fact that Cambyses is recorded as being a Zoroastrian. I suggest that Cyrus was also Zoroastrian. A prayer to Marduk, so they're praying to the Babylonian god. Then a declaration that Cyrus has enabled the people to live in peace and has increased the offerings made to the gods. Details of a rebuilding. Now, this is another common phenomenon you'll notice with religious writings. They have rebuilding activities go on in the early amount. So that's the book of Cyrus. The Cyrus Cylinder. When you actually have a look at the book of Isaiah in total, you start to see some interesting correlations. You notice that Jacob, who's a leading figure in Judaism, is reviled. You notice that Cyrus is written up as God's anointed one, the birth of the Messiah complex. You notice that there's a genealogy present in the Book of Kings, and there's a way of linking that. People will argue that that's got an earlier dating, but there's a way of proving that that is actually written the same time that the Book of Isaiah was written. You notice that, where are we? There's a rebuilding program. So there's certain similar patterns that emerge in the Book of Isaiah.
I can counter all of those, what you